You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis, the host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. He's going to drop all kinds of knowledge. Are you heading down to Gainesville this weekend?
I am. I'm actually driving, so tomorrow's going to be a pretty long day.
Yeah, there's no drive worse in the world than Pensacola to Tallahassee.
Perfect.
It is the worst drive in the world because all it is 3 hours of pine trees. You can't even see the stores off of the exits. And so it's terrible. Every now and then you're like thankful for a rest area. And when you get out of the rest area, it's like, hey, there's poisonous snakes and alligators everywhere. So beware. And so, so you should have a good time. That's a fun drive. It's about 2.5 hours north of me, Gainesville.
Okay. Yeah. This is my first time actually ever going to Florida, period. So this is a big weekend for me.
Yeah. Florida's awesome. I-75 between whenever you come off of Tallahassee and go down to Gainesville, I-75, it can be taxing.
I'm waking up at like 6 a.m. to go, and we're just going to power through.
Yeah, it's awesome. You'll have a good time. The temperatures are going to be, I think we're in summer junior right now is what we're calling it. So the temperature is going to be okay. We got a nice little cold front. I think it was 58 degrees when I went walking this morning. So, yeah, that was pretty nice. And this should be a pretty fun game because the Ole Miss football team, the stakes around this Ole Miss football team in this game has absolutely risen to a level that they haven't seen probably in 20 years in Oxford since they played LSU. And the difference between this game and that LSU game is Ole Miss is going against a very talented but true freshman quarterback and a 5-5 team. When that one, they were playing the team that won the national championship that year. So I think that this could be a situation to where if Ole Miss just goes, handles business, plays clean, they should be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I mean, everything that they want is right there in front of them for the taking. And if they play the way that they have played recently, this should not be a very taxing game in terms of what the scoreboard looks like. But you do always have to wonder, like, you got the Egg Bowl coming up in less than a week. You still have, I know they had the bye week, which I think was quite the blessing for them to not have to play Florida that very next week. I think that would have been a lot, just from a potential, letdown standpoint.
In 2008, when Ole Miss beat Florida in Gainesville, that was the Tebow Cried game. The next week, Ole Miss played against South Carolina in Oxford, and that wasn't a very good South Carolina team. That South Carolina team won the game. So you are absolutely right about the bye week.
Yeah. So I think they've had time to regroup and kind of get their heads, where they need to be. But, it's Florida. And again, it's a day game, which I do think also helps Ole Miss. I don't think they needed a night game in the swamp. But, listen, it's Florida. They're always going to be talented. They are playing their best right now. Now their best looks a little bit different than Ole Miss's best. But they still have some dudes. DJ Lagway, he's a true freshman, but he can play. He's a little bit hampered right now with that hamstring injury, and I think that's a good thing for Ole Miss too. But he's dynamic. He's really talented. He can make teams pay with that arm. So, but again, if there's only been a couple times this year where Ole Miss didn't really look like Ole Miss. The Kentucky game, they did not look like Ole Miss. And at the end of that LSU game, they didn't look like Ole Miss. They couldn't close things out. Every other game they have, it's been pretty good. Even the second half against Oklahoma, they outscored them 20-0 or whatever it was. When Ole Miss looks like Ole Miss and they play the way that we think they're supposed to play, I don't think Florida will be able to have the firepower on either side of the ball to hang with them.
Yeah, honestly, and I'm sitting here thinking about it because you always have to worry with me of having just like Ole Miss colored glasses on, of everything clouding my thought. But the Ole Miss team that beat Georgia a couple of weeks back, there's not a team in the country that really has a good chance to beat Ole Miss when they play like that.
Yeah, I mean that Ole Miss team that we saw. I mean, it's the best. This is my fourth season. It's the best performance I have seen, top to bottom, all things considered. I don't think it's really even close, just in terms of the level of competition and everything at stake. Yeah, I mean, when that team comes out there and they play defense the way they play defense, they're, guys like DJ Lagway are going to have really crappy days potentially.
Yeah, and against Florida, and DJ Lagway is not 100%. I think I did a podcast last night to where I was on with somebody in Florida, and they said they rigged up something in his jersey that was basically keeping his leg from being able to fully extend to protect the hamstring. That's how he played, and there was no running going on. So that tells me it wasn't as good as they were letting on, and he just was able to manage to play because their third-string quarterback was so bad. So that tells me right offhand, this is a J.J. Pegues, Walter Nolan special type of game, to where if Ole Miss can get pressure up the middle against that and force him to move side to side where Suntarine Perkins and Princely and Mommy Ellen are sitting out there, it seems like that's the recipe to prevent them from getting the explosive plays that right now they're living off of.
Yeah, and Florida's offensive line has actually played pretty well this season. I think that's been a little bit of a surprise for them. I think they've given up 13 sacks this season, which is tied for fewest in the SEC. So they've been pretty good. But again, that's been when, their guys have been full strength at quarterback. And again, you don't play many defensive lines quite like Ole Miss's, if any. Yeah, I mean, if DJ Lagway is unable to make things happen, if he's a sitting duck back there, they have 46 sacks right now. They're averaging 4 point whatever a game. It seems like it could be one of those games where they're right on pace, if not above that.
Yeah, one thing that just blows my mind, a statistic that just blows my mind that I'll think about and remember probably into my dying day, is the fact that right now Ole Miss is number one in the country in tackles for loss with like 105, and number two is like 20 tackles for loss behind Ole Miss. I mean, it's an absurd number.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too that really, even if you don't know the numbers, it passes the eyeball test. Like when you watch Ole Miss, they are living in the opposing backfield, whether it's a run, a pass, whatever it is. They have done such a good job of controlling the line of scrimmage. It's been exactly what they needed.
Yeah, and this week, a couple of things on the availability report this week. Tre Harris comes back. He's probable. It looks like he's going to play. Lane Kiffin's been talking about him. My general rule, by the way, on availability reports is anything that Lane Kiffin volunteers, I do not believe. And anything that he doesn't want to talk about, I assume that he might play. But I think that might be a little bit different this week with Tre Harris because I think he is genuinely excited to have him back.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always do get a little bit worried when he volunteers information because it's like, okay, why out of the goodness of your heart are you giving this to us now as opposed to other times when we don't hear anything? But I mean, it sounds like he was close to playing a couple times and game day came and he just couldn't do it. But I think the bye week was obviously really good for him. And again, how many is he going to be on a pitch count? Who knows? But any amount of him is just so dangerous, especially with how well the other receivers have been playing. I mean, if you make them cover, somebody is going to be open. I know we talked about that before the season started. Somebody's going to be open. And early in the season, they were very dependent on Tre Harris. But since his injury, you never want to see a guy get hurt. But it's really opened up the offense in terms of finding the other guys. Now you add him back in. I mean, it should be we thought it was going to be really dynamic when the season started, when all of the pieces were healthy. It should be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, the important thing will be that Tre Harris getting incorporated into the offense that they have been running and not going back and reverting to the offense that Tre Harris was running in the early part of the season.
100%. And there were a lot of times when, I know fans online, they'll get, they see too many hitches or they see those throws out to the flat to Harris where you just make a move and you're thinking, why aren't they throwing to Juice Wells or why aren't they throwing to Jordan Watkins or whatever it is? Again, like you said, if they run the spread out offense that they've been doing these last 3.5 games, they should be in really good shape.
Yeah, I can't imagine because you know that Florida wants to double team. If Tre Harris is out there, he's going to get 2 defenders. They have to, and they understand that. But those other guys, this would almost be a terrific decoy game for Lane Kiffin. And he could probably get over the hump just by all the attention that they're going to have to face with Tre Harris, with guys that running an offense that he's fairly comfortable with doing.
Yeah, and I think too, like, if it's always dangerous to get into the Lane Kiffin psyche, but maybe he's saying Tre Harris is looking really good, so they put more attention on him, and again, it opens up things for other guys. So I agree. I think there's potential for a guy like Watkins or Juice Wells or Caden Lee. Caden Lee is I don't want to say quietly, but he's had a really, really nice year. He's got 600 something yards, and he is not a guy that. I don't think we thought he was going to have that sort of a role when the season started, when you looked at all the other pieces. Somebody's going to have a big game if Tre Harris is there. It might be Tre Harris, but I think there's a really good chance that somebody else is able to really prosper because Tre Harris is back out there.
Hey, and if you look at the availability report for the first time this year, Logan Diggs is questionable as opposed to out. So here's my theory on Logan Diggs. Ole Miss fans do not need to expect Logan Diggs to have a lion's share carries against Florida. That's not going to happen. But what Ole Miss fans should probably hope for is that Logan Diggs starts getting 1 or 2 carries and start getting contact ready before the playoffs. And maybe if you can do that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who hasn't played in the game in quite a while. So again, he's been practicing. From what it sounds like, that is very, very different from an actual game scenario. So yeah, I mean, really anything you can get from him these next couple of games is a plus. And then, if he's feeling better by the playoff, then you've got a really, really good back who's produced a lot everywhere he's been.
All right. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we're going to talk to Michael about what other games around the country has his attention going into this weekend. Remember, Ole Miss fans, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time right now in this situation. But first, I do want to let you know about Prize Picks. It's time to level up your football season with Prize Picks, the ultimate way to add some real excitement to your game day. Whether you're a stats guru or just love the thrill of daily fantasy, Prize Picks makes it simple and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real cash prizes. Here's what sets Prize Picks apart. You can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. That's right. Just pick more or less on player projections like rushing yards, touchdowns, or passing completions. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. And that means if one of your players gets hurt in the first half and doesn't return, your lineup stays active. They've made everything so fast and secure. Withdrawals can hit your account in as little as 15 minutes. And now they even offer Venmo for deposits and payments. So this week, I'm looking at the football boards and everything's like, okay, I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes more than 1.5 touchdown passes, maybe take a Justin Jefferson pick at more than 83.5 receiving yards. Yeah, that seems like a good trick. It's so easy to play. Just open the app, make your picks, and under 60 seconds, let the fun begin. It's been a blast sharing picks with friends and injury insurance that definitely gives me that peace of mind. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $50 instantly when you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And hello, everybody. I do have something for you that is actually a real game changer. It's called Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed to help you feel great the morning after a night out. It's created by PhD scientists. Z-Biotics tackles those rough mornings by breaking down that toxic byproduct in your gut that is responsible for your hangovers, not dehydration like most people think. Look, I won't lie. I was a bit skeptical at first, but while hanging out with some friends at a weekend barbecue, I decided to give it a try. I made Z-Biotics my first drink of the night, followed by my usual favorite drink. The next morning, boom, I felt amazing. It was like I hadn't even gone out the night before. No sluggishness, no grogginess. I was just ready to take on the next day. So here's how it works. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme that breaks down that toxic byproduct in your gut that's responsible for those rough mornings. So just remember, For the best results, make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. And of course, drink responsibly. Head on over to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the code LockedOnCollege, all one word, at checkout. Plus, ZBiotics is backed by a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied, they'll just refund your money. No questions asked. So remember, that's zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Try ZBiotics, the key for feeling your best after a night out. So, Michael, we're getting in here the walking and chewing gum segment of this Ole Miss schedule. And yes, Ole Miss fans, if you're watching this video, you have to win every game. If you don't win in every game, you're not going to end up in the playoffs. You know they're having that same conversation at Tennessee, at Alabama, at Georgia, everywhere else as well. So, yes, you have to win your game. But there's other stuff that can happen in this that you need to pay attention to, because Ole Miss is fairly close to where if they went out and a couple of things happen, hosting is a genuine possibility, Michael.
Yeah, so in looking at the schedule this weekend, I have to ask, is there any way that Kentucky beats Texas?
No, I don't think so, but I think there's a way that Kentucky covers against Texas.
Yeah, I mean, this Kentucky is just one of the great baffling mysteries of this season. If the Kentucky team that played in Oxford a few months ago was at Texas, maybe they'd have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bold decision and bold choice on their part to try and play football without an offense. But hey, God bless them. I mean, Mark Stoops went to Iowa. I mean, this all tracks.
No, This is the ideal. This is the ideal football for Mark Stoops.
I genuinely think that Texas A&M is beating Texas, and then when Texas A&M beats Texas and they become a 10-2 team, Texas is going to the back of the line of all those two-loss SEC teams from third in the conference. So I don't think Texas makes the playoffs if they lose to Texas A&M.
Yeah, Texas doesn't really have any great wins that I know of.
Their best win is Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and that's Vanderbilt's had a nice season, but that's not one where you can really say, wow, like that was what a game that was. Normally
in the SEC, when a team's best win is Vanderbilt, you're hoping for the Liberty Bowl. Birmingham's in your future at that point.
Texas has to win out, I think, to feel really, really good about it.
Yeah, and Texas A&M, they're on massive upset alert this weekend when they head down and play a night game at Jordan Hare Stadium. And you've been in that stadium. There's crazy voodoo. That's a weird atmosphere. A night game at Jordan Hare is fantastic. You know, Ole Miss fans that are interested in Deuce Knight and other players that are committed to Auburn, this might be a night that negatively affects the recruitment of Deuce Knight, because if that place gets going, Auburn wins the game and all that, there could be a nice bump. But if Auburn beats A&M, that actually helps you when it comes to the hosting question that we're going to talk about. So it's kind of like 50%. And I always tell people, if somebody doesn't sign out of high school with your school, don't worry. There's still 9 more opportunities to get them.
Yeah, no, 100%. As a USC grad, I just saw a quarterback committed to us for a very long time. Announced on the Pat McAfee show that he's going somewhere else. So there are
Colorado.
Yes, there are always opportunities to be swayed, and even when you end up somewhere, you can leave. But we talked about this before. Like, this does feel like the kind of game that Hugh Freeze could just somehow pull it out, right? Like, this has Hugh Freeze shenanigans written all over it. It really does.
And I want to be real. If South Carolina can do what they did to Texas A&M, Auburn can do the same thing. It's just up to Hugh to use Jarquez Hunter in the backfield and play that game. They are good defensively. They're good offensively. They can tie Marcel Reed in knots, and they're excellent at stopping the run. And all of a sudden you have a low-scoring game. That's a game that Auburn can win.
Yeah, and I know Peyton Thorne's been thrown under the bus a couple of times this year, including by his own coach.
He's a speed bump at this point.
He is, but he's actually been playing pretty well lately. So he's, he hasn't been the problem. They have found ways to lose games this year in often tragic fashion, but this does feel like a kind of game that they could, again, like you said, the night game there it's a different beast. You get a different team when it's a night game there.
Yeah. And then you have Indiana and Ohio State. This is a game that everybody's going to be watching. I think Ohio State's like a 14-point favorite, which, by the way, if you are the number 5 team playing the number 2 team and you're not favored by more than 2 touchdowns, you're more than a 2-touchdown underdog, you're not the number 5 team.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can only play the schedule that's in front of you, but the schedule in front of them has been pretty not particularly impressive. I think
G5, let's just call it G5-ish is what it's been.
Yeah,
there's probably MAC teams that have played a similar schedule.
Yeah, I mean, their schedule's in the 100s. I think their best win is Michigan, and they didn't beat them by much. And this is not Michigan of last year. This is this has been a struggling Michigan program that, speaking of programs that decided to not run offense this year, they also are among those teams.
I wish Michigan and Kentucky could play. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
That cruel and unusual punishment.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I know, but here's the thing, though. Like, we are going to learn exactly what Indiana is this weekend, one way or the other. If they can keep it close-ish, then you know what? They deserve their shot. If they get blown out, then they're the team that I think we all think they might be. Because we haven't seen them play anybody good. Again, Kirk Cignetti's done an amazing job. They were bad last year. Again, you win all the games that are on your schedule, but I'm interested to see how I don't think there's much of a world where Ohio State doesn't win this game. For me, it's just by how much.
Yeah. And honestly, and this same thing goes for Texas. So this isn't an SEC Big Ten take that I have. But if you don't beat a team that has a number next to their name, you do not deserve to be in the playoffs.
That's fair.
In a whole season, if you look down that schedule, it's the same reason they keep out like Army without winning the conference championship. They're not going to get it. It's because they don't play anybody. It's the same thing. And everybody's going to say, well, it's not their fault. Well, it wasn't Army's fault either. It's not, all these other schools' problem as well. But you're not going to get an at-large bid doing that. You have to win it all if you're going to play nobody.
Yeah, and I know strength of schedule is always something that comes up in early December when we talk about the playoff committee and what they're doing. You just want them to be consistent with it. If you're going to hold it against one team, you got to hold it against all of the teams. And if that's the case, then if Texas ends up 10-2 or whatever it is, and they have one, I think Vanderbilt was ranked when they played, but they weren't ranked super high. Is that good enough to get them in the mix? So I think there's a lot of crazy shenanigans left here, but you just want the committee to be consistent.
Do you want to know the actual real chaos scenario?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So it sets up with let's take the ACC champion, SEC champion, and Big Ten champion in the thing. So you have the other bye that's out there and the other team that is going to get the automatic bid. Right now, the other bye goes to the Mountain West and Boise State. It was Boise State runs the table. They get that bye. The next one is where it becomes interesting. Let's say Army beats Notre Dame and jumps, and they have that jump after beating Notre Dame. And Army wins the American championship. Would that be higher than the Big 12 champion, meaning the Big 12 is completely locked out of the playoffs this year?
That'd be wild. And we got this weekend, we got BYU Arizona State, which is a very interesting game given BYU's weekend. And I believe there's Kansas is hosting somebody who's pretty good.
Colorado.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for the Big 12 to have very weird scenarios.
Yeah, it's interesting that a quote Power 4, because I don't actually do the Power 4. There's a Power 2 and there's like a group of 7 is what it is. You know what I mean? That's what it is. But I mean, just to call it what it is, it's interesting to see them struggling at the level they are. And what that is, and everybody's like, why is this happening? It's like, well, there's not an elite team in that conference, and we knew that going into this season. But there's also a bunch of really good teams and not really any bad teams. So you got a whole bunch of teams that it's very comparable to what the NFC North looks like or the NFC South, where it's all close games one way or another, and you never know what's going to happen, but everybody's going to take an L, and you're not going to have the strength of schedule to crow about it at the end of the year like the SEC.
It's, again, like, I know that we're so close to the end of this thing, but there's something weird, at least one weird thing that's going to happen here.
Yeah, should be pretty good. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. Michael's going down to Gainesville for the game. What do you have otherwise for the Daily Journal?
Well, still, heading into this week, we covered a lot of bye week stuff, and obviously Lane had some thoughts about the SEC championship game, so some stuff about that. Obviously, monitoring Tre Harris, and then of course there's a quick turnaround to the Egg Bowl. So a lot of stuff happening right now, and I'm just excited to get down to Gainesville and cover this game and drive back, and then have the Egg Bowl less than a week later. It's going to be a whirlwind, but it should be fun.
Yeah, it's kind of weird whenever you get to Gainesville and realize it's not really close to anything. It's almost like a Buc-ee's on the side of the interstate. What Gainesville is, that's what it is. You're driving down. Oh, there it is. There's the University of Florida. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no. Its location makes it very hard to fly into, which is part of why I'm driving down there. But it'll be an adventure.
All right, thank you, buddy. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, man. Talk to you later.